Welcome back. We're here with Republican presidential candidate Newt Gingrich. We're here in Iowa. Just wrapping up this first. Are you going to attack them? Are you going to fight back? Because under the theory, if you're slapped, you should slap back. You don't want to do that?
No, I'm going to say totally positive. The ads we're going to put up are on jobs and economic growth. We're going to talk about leadership to create jobs and economic growth. And I think the people of Iowa have a great opportunity in the caucus to send a signal to the country that negative ads written by dishonest consultants on behalf of irresponsible candidates do not deserve getting votes.
Will you hold to that if you get the Republican nomination in a fight against President Obama?
Sure, but all you have to do is tell the truth about Obama, and it feels like a negative ad.
But your super PACs or whatever, they'll go after him.
But we'll tell the truth. I mean, I'm happy to say he's the best food stamp president in American history. That's not an attack. That's a statement of fact. I mean, it's a little. I mean, you have to distinguish between being allowed to have a factual debate and the kind of negative ads you were describing that are drowning the people of Iowa.
The story in the Wall Street Journal this morning, we'll get to the president later. Gingrich applauded Romney's health plan, the 2006 newsletter. That from your consulting firm, your consulting company, under a section called Newt Notes, wrote this: "We agree entirely with Governor Romney and Massachusetts legislators that our goal should be 100% insurance coverage for all Americans." He went on to say, "Massachusetts leaders are to be commended for this bipartisan proposal to tackle the enormous challenge of finding real solutions for creating a sustainable health system."
At the very same time, the Heritage Foundation said this is a very important experiment in the right direction.
The Heritage Foundation said that in the early 90s.
But they also said it again at the time of Romney's passing his bill.
They did praise the...
Right. They said there's a lot of useful things.
So you liked the mandates at that time.
And then you watched it go to work. And where Romney and I are different is I concluded it doesn't work. He still defends it. I think when you look at the cost, when you look at the degree to which they've politicized health care, when you look at things like putting Planned Parenthood in a position of decision, having the state pay for abortions, there are a lot of details of Romney care that are unacceptable. And the difference between Romney and me is I've now concluded, I'm prepared to say publicly, I concluded, just as the Heritage Foundation did, that idea didn't work, and I have shifted towards John Goodman's patient power. Romney's still defending the mandate that he passed.
But remember that interview you did on Meet the Press earlier this year, I think it was in May, you seemed to still at that time be supporting some form of mandates.
Well, notice the phrase here. I think it would be great to find a way to get every American covered. I think that would be better for the country. Can you do that without a mandate? And part of what John Goodman does is he creates a pool so if you don't want to buy insurance, you're not compelled to. Your share of the tax break would go into a charity pool. If something happens to you, the charity pool takes care of you. And there are ways to do it that you don't infringe on constitutional freedom.
All right, here's an ad that Ron Paul is playing. This is not a super PAC. This is Ron Paul's campaign, and it's very tough. I knew I'll play it.
Support for an individual mandate, a key tenet of President Obama's health care law.
Support for an individual mandate? Folks, don't ask me to explain this.
Everything that Gingrich railed against when he was in the House, he went the other way when he got paid to go the other way.
He's demonstrating himself to be the very essence of the Washington insiders.
It's about serial hypocrisy.
Serial hypocrisy, that's what Ron Paul is accusing you of. And you're telling me, and I've covered you and have known you for a long time, somebody says you're involved in serial hypocrisy and you're not going to fight back?
Well, first of all, as people get to know more about Ron Paul, who disowns 10 years of his own newsletter, says he didn't really realize what was in it, had no idea what he was making money on, had no idea that it was racist, anti-Semitic, called for the destruction of Israel, talked about a race war. All this is a sudden shock to Ron Paul. There'll come a morning people won't take him as a serious person. This is a man who happened to have had a good cause, auditing the Federal Reserve, cleaning up the Federal Reserve. And I think as a protest, he's a very reasonable candidate. As a potential president, a person who thinks the United States was responsible for 9/11, a person who believes, who wrote in his newsletter that the World Trade Center bombing in '93 might have been a CIA plot, a person who believes it doesn't matter if the Iranians have a nuclear weapon. I'd rather just say, you look at Ron Paul's total record of systemic avoidance of reality, and you look at his newsletters, and then you look at his ads. His ads are about as accurate as his newsletters.
Now, if he were to get the Republican nomination, let's say he were, could you vote for him?
No.
What would you do?
I don't see how.
Could you vote for President Obama?
Somebody who gets up and says, "I don't care if Israel's destroyed. I don't care if I don't care if the Iranians get a nuclear weapon."
I'm not so sure he says Israel destroyed, but what he does say, he doesn't think Iran represents a threat to Israel, even if it had a nuclear bomb.
Look, what he says is that's a risk he's willing to take. And he just had one of his former staff say flatly that he said over and over again Israel was a mistake. I mean, I think it's very difficult to see how you would engage in dealing with Ron Paul as a nominee.
All right, so let's just be precise.
Given the newsletters, which he has not yet disowned.
You could not vote for Ron Paul.
He would have to go a long way to explain himself, and I think it would be very difficult to see today Ron Paul as the Republican nominee.
What would you do if the choice were Ron Paul or Barack Obama?
I think you'd have a very hard choice at that point.
What would you do?
I don't know, but I think Barack Obama is very destructive to the future of the United States. I think Ron Paul's views are totally outside the mainstream of virtually every decent American. Now, that's going to be very controversial, but I just suggest to people, before you decide that I'm wrong, read the newsletters. Look at what he said and ask yourself, this is a very serious question for the United States. It's a very serious question.
So you don't accept his explanation? He never read that? He never wrote it? Only years later did he look at it?
So he spent 10 years earning he's attacking me for serial hypocrisy, and he spent 10 years earning money out of a newsletter that had his name that he didn't notice. All I'm saying is I think he's got to come up with some very straight answers to get somebody to take him seriously. Would I be willing to listen to him? Sure. Are there circumstances you'd have to weigh heavily? Yes. I think the choice of Ron Paul or Barack Obama would be a very bad choice for America.
Would you run as a third-party candidate?
It's not going to happen. He's not going to get the Republican nomination.
What if he did?
He's not going to.
He might win here in Iowa.
He's not going to get the nomination. It won't happen. The people of the United States are not going to accept somebody who thinks it's irrelevant if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. And I think that is a national security threat to the United States of the first order. And I'm very willing to draw the line and say to everybody in this country, if you think it doesn't matter for the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon, then Ron Paul's a reasonable candidate. But if you think the Iranians might use it on an American city, then you had better find a different candidate than Ron Paul.
Let me move on to Virginia. We have a question from somebody from Facebook. But you know what? Let me take a quick break.